जयति पराशरसूनुः सत्यवती हृदयनन्दनो व्यासः यस्य आस्य कमलगलितं वाङ्मयममृतं जगत्पिबति भुजगभोगाभमुद्यम्य हृद्यं निजभुजं दक्षिणं लक्षणाढ्यं ललितमुद्रिक्तविज्ञानमुद्रं भज भज अनन्तमित्यालपन्तं प्रणतवान् प्राणिनां प्राणभूतं प्रणतिभिः प्रणये पूर्णबोधम् भवदवोष्णेन तातप्यमानान् भुवि परं नाथम् अप्रेक्षमाणान् भुवनमान्येन च अन्येन दोष्णा भवतु भीर्मा इति नः सान्त्वयन्तम् प्रणतवान् प्राणिनां प्राणभूतं प्रणतिभिः प्रणये पूर्णबोधम्.
Let us go through the barriers within us. At the outset, we are all created out of Pancha Bhuta, Kham, Vayuhu, Jyoti, Apaha and Prithvi. It means that 5 elements constitute our gross body. Space, wind, fire, water and earth. All living things have these elements in common. Pancha Bhutas form the Annamaya Kosha, sheath of food, and Pranamaya Kosha, sheath of prana or life. Earth and water form the Annamaya Kosha. Space, wind and fire forms the Pranamaya Kosha. The prana comes from the breathing function. Breathing keeps the air flowing in us and maintains the fire to keep the body at a specific temperature within the space of the body. In addition to the basic elements, the body has 5 indriyas, the sense organs for perception, including eyes for seeing, ears for hearing, nose for smelling, tongue for tasting, and skin for touch. Now we come to Manomaya Kosha or sheath of the mind. This kosha or sheath consists of manas, the mind, buddhi, the intellect, and ahankara, the awareness of the self. The first one in the Manomaya Kosha is the mind or the manas, whose function is to desire and doubt. When we see something nice, we desire to possess it. The desire arises in our minds. But the mind lacks the capacity to decide. The decision of the Manomaya Kosha is by the buddhi or the intellect, whose function is to think and decide. So, the intellect within us decides what is right and what is wrong before taking a decision. When kids make mistakes, we explain their actions by saying that they do not have the buddhi or the capacity to think and decide between the right and the wrong. And this does not mean that elders have more intelligence than young kids. The elder folk are just under an imaginary belief that they are more intelligent. We often see that young kids display much higher intelligence than their elders. In addition to manas and buddhi, the third part within the Manomaya Kosha is the ahankara or the awareness of the self. I have earlier mentioned that this awareness is present even during our sleep. None of what we see or hear makes sense if the awareness is not there. This awareness, also referred to as prajna, is the main link between our inner world of thoughts and decisions and the external world of sensory perception. It is present within us at all times. It is there even during sleep. It experiences pure bliss in deep sleep since it is just by itself, oblivious of external sensory connections. Also, it knows what it does not know. During deep sleep, the only awareness we have is the self. We are not aware of our external identity, possessions, relationships, and etc. Thus, when the self is by itself, it is blissful experience called as Ananda. When we are awake, the I within us joins the world of mine. When I get mixed with mine, all the problems start. I is pure bliss. Mine is the reason for sorrow. How did we lose the sense of awareness that is present during sleep and absent while we are awake? Why do we live a life without proper awareness? Answers to these questions come as the main caution our ancient philosophy provides us. We need to live a life of pure awareness. In addition to Manomaya Kosha within us is the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the scientific sheath that includes Chitta, Manas, Buddhi and Ahankara. The Vijnanamaya Kosha can store information and collect relevant data from memory. Without remembering what one sees and hears, one's development becomes very difficult. Chitta enables one to accumulate and store perceived knowledge in memory. The expansion of Chitta is called Chetana, which resides in the Anandamaya Kosha or the sheath of bliss. Thus, the capacity of the human mind is very vast. Under hypnosis, there have been instances of people recollecting past lives, which is the work of our consciousness. The human brain has millions of nerve centers. The network of these cells is so huge that our capacity to think, store, and retrieve information, perform complex computation, and etc. is very high. Thus, nothing escapes our consciousness. We usually use only a fraction of these nerve centers for our day-to-day information processing. However, our Chetana has the extraordinary capacity to integrate past, present, and future. In the Upanishads, our ancient sages contemplated the structure of the mind and provided beautiful explanations of the various capabilities as well as limitations that exist within us. Shraddha, the Panchabhutas or the 5 elements, the 5 Indriyas or the sense organs, and the contents of the mind, namely Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara, and Chitta, define the 15 barriers within us. Why are these referred to as barriers? The reason is that they limit our ability to be fully aware. For example, we can see because of our eyesight, but we can only see things within the walls of the room we are in. We cannot see what is outside, beyond the wall. But once you close your eyes, you can see everything that is inside and outside. That is due to our inner vision of what is known as the third eye. But to see with the inner vision, we must have seen the outer world at least once. We can see a lot more when we close our eyes. We can see America or the Chandraloka or anything that comes to mind. But with open eyes, we are limited to seeing what is within the walls of our room. Thus, eyes limit our vision of the external world. The eyes are external, while truth is internal. The Upanishad states, Avrita chakshuhu, amritatvam icchan. If you want to see the truth, see with your eyes closed. Once you close your external eyes, your internal eye opens. So we have three eyes. The third eye is the internal eye. The switch to open the third eye is to close the two external eyes. The external eyes always want to see more, enjoy seeing the world of beauty, but as long as they are open, the internal eye remains closed. So we have to learn to exercise control to open and close our eyes as needed. Similarly, all other indriyas have their barriers by limiting our perception of the external world and preventing us from seeing the truth within us. Anna or food is necessary to sustain our body, but overindulgence in food leads to problems like weight increase, obesity. This weight increase is for the body and not the eye within the body. Also, by focusing more on food, we tend to focus on the needs of the external body and less on the true internal self. Next, we have viryam, or the physical strength or stamina, also a characteristic of the external body. Then there are the barriers of Tapa, mantras and karma. Tapa is deep thinking within the mind or manas. It is to think about what to do. Also, deep contemplation on any specific topic is known as tapas. Mantras refer to our utterances. It is to talk about what to do. Karma refers to the action of doing itself. Karma keeps us busy doing things. All these limit us to the external world. Our thoughts, speeches, and actions refer to the external world. All of our actions are focused on the transactions of the world. We compete with our fellow beings and try to show our superiority. We do not spend enough time on internal contemplation. Thus, we have the 13 barriers. The 14th barrier is the loka, the worldly wealth we accumulate or claim our ownership to. Therefore, we identify with our wealth. So, when we lose wealth, we behave as if we lost everything and have no identification. We lose the self-confidence that I am still alive and that I can always regain wealth. The last barrier, or the 15th barrier, is the name or fame. We identify ourselves with our name so much. We forget that we did not have any name while we were born. Bhagavan Krishna calls these barriers kshara or perishable. So we should destroy these barriers and realize our true self within us. Our name is just a reference to our body, nothing more. There is an interesting story about the name in Bhagavatam. There was a king called Chitraketu who had lots of wives. But he did not have any children. One day, sage Agastya visited him, and the king implored him to grant him a boon to have a child. Agastya was a visionary and told him not to ask for such a boon. He told him that if a child were to be born, he would make the king very happy for a short time and cause a lot of sadness afterwards. The king was not in the mood to listen. He persisted with sage Agastya, who then granted him his wish. Soon, one of the queens gave birth to a son. There was a lot of joy in the kingdom. The king was delighted, doted on the queen, and spent more time with the child's mother. Other queens got jealous and saw that the reason was the new baby and plotted to have the baby poisoned. With the baby dead, the sorrow drowned the king. He could not contain himself and started wailing. Hearing the news, sage Agastya came to his place. The king now requested the sage to bring the child somehow back from the dead using the powers of his tapas. After a lot of cajoling, Agastya said to the king, "I know you want the dead body back alive, but let us ask if the soul wants to return to the body." The sage asked the soul, "Your parents would be very happy if you enter the boy's dead body. Can you kindly consider this request?" The soul answered back, "You are telling me to come back to earth to please my parents? Which parents are you talking about? I have thousands of fathers and mothers through previous lives. I am delighted with this liberation. Why do you want me to re-enter the cage of a human body?" Thus the sage explained to the king not to make such a request. The soul is not interested in returning. Let me relate another incident, a recent one that happened in our district. There is an old gentleman who lives with his family near Puttur. He is a realized person and an advanced soul. His daughter-in-law had an unmarried sister who lived with them. She was a cancer patient. One day, the gentleman left home for a few days. He left behind a note. And the note said, "This jiva is preparing to leave the body to free itself from the suffering of cancer. You also prepare for its departure." After 3 days, when he returned home with a disciple of his, he found the house full of people crying in grief. He saw the dead body, looked at the sky and laughed, saying, "It has finally gone." The disciple was bewildered. He asked the gentleman, "Why are you laughing when everyone is grieving?" The old man replied, "Look, the gross body was suffering from cancer, but the subtle body was not. So the subtle body has escaped from the gross body with joy. How can I cry at this sight?" Thus, we identify the body with our name and live a life trying to achieve fame for that name. The domain of our jiva has 15 barriers. We have to break out of these barriers to find our true identity, the self. The barriers protect the true I within us. We have kept the true identity of ourself safely within these barriers, and we now face the situation of not being able to find our true self. We own a very invaluable jiva. The Bhagavan has enclosed it with 15 wrappers. We need to open the wrappers to taste the real essence of our jiva. The Upanishad says, when we enclose an object with a golden ornament, we hide the truth with a false covering. We enjoy the covering and not the real beauty inside. To enjoy the real beauty, we have to remove the covering. Thus, the real jiva resides beyond the 15 perishable barriers. Thus, Bhagavan Krishna refers to the 16th as Kshara.